10 wheels. 10. Not 4, like every other land vehicle you've ever seen on a public road. 10. And the moment you understand why this concept is sitting on 6 wheels, everything else about it starts to make sense. Now, before we go any further, I want to be upfront with you, the way I always am on this channel. What you're looking at is an AI-generated concept design. It doesn't exist in any factory, nobody's building it, nobody's selling it. No manufacturer, no price tag, no delivery date. Pure imagination. And honestly, that's exactly why it deserves a serious breakdown. Because when a designer has 0 real-world constraints, 0 boardroom politics, 0 engineering compromises, what comes out the other side tells you something true about where design wants to go. Stay with me, because there's something happening at the transition point between the cab and the living module that I want to save for when we get there. And once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. The front face. Let's start at the front, because the front face of a vehicle like this either makes you believe it or it doesn't. And this one, it believes in itself completely. The first thing that hits you is the windshield. This is not a windshield designed for a truck. The rake on this glass, the angle, the sheer amount of it, is closer to what you'd find on a high-performance sports coupe than on anything that weighs what this thing must weigh. It wraps back and up, almost into the roofline, giving the driver a field of vision that I'd estimate puts most commercial motorhomes to shame. But here's what's interesting about that choice. It's not just visual drama. A steeply raked windshield like this actively reduces the blunt wall of air resistance that a flat-faced vehicle has to bulldoze through at highway speed. On something this size, that matters enormously. We're talking meaningful efficiency gains, not marginal ones. Below the glass, the front bumper integration is surprisingly clean. You can see 3 circular fog or running lights tucked into the lower fascia. Minimal, precise, almost like they belong on a piece of industrial equipment rather than a road vehicle. And that's the mood this front face is setting. Not aggressive, not showy, purposeful, like something that was designed to work. Now, step back and take in the full profile. This is where the concept really starts to speak. What you're looking at is essentially 2 visual masses. The lower section, the chassis, the wheel arches, everything from the ground up to about mid-door height is all black, deep, matte, almost industrial black. And sitting on top of that, almost floating, is the habitable module, this long, smooth, satin silver form that curves and tapers and flows like it was shaped in a wind tunnel. That visual split is deliberate. It's saying, below this line is machine, above this line is home. And the horizontal blue LED strip that runs between those 2 worlds, that's the accent mark. That's the designer saying, here, this is the dividing line between the world outside and the world inside. The surface on the upper module is where things get genuinely impressive. These aren't flat panels. The light across these surfaces moves. As the angle changes, you can see sculptural creases, long horizontal lines that compress toward the rear, creating a sense of aerodynamic motion even when the vehicle is completely still. On a silver finish like this, that surfacing is everything. It catches light differently at different times of day. At sunrise, parked at a remote campsite with nothing but mountains behind it, this thing would look like it landed from somewhere else. The 10 wheels stance. Let's talk about the wheels, because this is the detail that changes everything about what this concept is saying. 10 wheels, 3 axles. That's a configuration you typically see on heavy military equipment or specialist expedition vehicles. And the reason it exists is simple: load distribution. When you're carrying the kind of living space this upper module is suggesting, think full-height ceilings, structural walls, possibly even a second observation deck on the roof. You need more contact points with the road to handle that mass safely and stably. But the wheels themselves, look at them. These are not functional, ugly commercial wheels. These are turbine-style, multi-spoke, deep-dish rims with what appears to be blue LED illumination built into the center. At night, this thing would look like it's floating on 6 glowing rings. That's not subtle. That's a statement. And the tire profile, the height of the sidewall relative to the rim, tells us something too. There's enough sidewall here to suggest genuine all-terrain capability. This isn't a vehicle designed to live on perfect asphalt. The designer is imagining this thing rolling onto unpaved ground, off-road, off-grid, wherever you want to point it.
The roofline and upper deck. Now look up, because the roof on this concept is one of its most interesting design decisions, and I suspect most people watching will glance at it and move on without realizing what they're looking at. There appears to be a raised secondary structure on top of the main living module, a secondary deck. The railing or guardrail visible up there suggests this isn't just a storage platform. It's designed to be accessed, stood on, used. Think about that for a second. You're parked above a canyon at golden hour. You climb up top, you're standing 8-9 feet off the ground with a 360-degree unobstructed view of everything around you. No walls, no glass, just you, the sky, and whatever wild place you drove this thing into. That's not a motorhome feature, that's a yacht feature, and it's been put on a land vehicle. The rear. We'll get a cleaner look at the rear in a moment, but from this angle, the tapering of the rear module already tells us something important. The designer has pulled the body inward toward the back, reducing the cross-section of air being dragged along behind the vehicle. On something this large, that kind of disciplined aerodynamic management at the tail is the difference between a vehicle that fights the air and one that moves through it. The exterior of Stealth Ground is, as concepts go, one of the more cohesive I've analyzed. Nothing here feels arbitrary. Everything has a reason. But honestly, the exterior is just the beginning. What I think is happening inside this thing is where it gets genuinely interesting. No interior images with this concept, which means we do what we always do on this channel. We read the exterior like a blueprint, and we figure out what's almost certainly in there. And with Stealth Ground, the exterior is actually extraordinarily generous with clues. Overall layout logic. Based on the proportions visible here, and I want to be clear this is informed analysis of an AI-generated concept, not confirmed specs, the habitable section of this vehicle looks to span somewhere in the range of 30 to 35 feet in usable interior length. That is significant. That's apartment significant. The natural division I'd expect, forward third is the cockpit and a transitional lounge or dining area. Middle third is the primary living space, kitchen, living room equivalent, workspace. Rear third is private, bedroom, bathroom, storage. That's the layout logic most intelligent motorhome concepts gravitate toward because it mirrors how we actually live. Public zones toward the front, private zones toward the back. The further you walk, the more yours it becomes. Ceiling height and light. Here's the number that I keep coming back to when I look at this exterior. That upper module, the living pod, based on its proportions relative to the wheel diameter, appears to offer interior ceiling height somewhere in the range of 7 to 7.5 feet. 7.5 feet. In a vehicle? That's the difference between a space that feels like a cabin and a space that feels like a home. Full stand-up height. No ducking, no that slightly crouched posture you unconsciously adopt when the ceiling is 2 inches too low. You walk in, you stand straight, and your nervous system stops categorizing this as a vehicle and starts categorizing it as a place. Now, combine that height with the window placement we can see from outside. These are not small porthole windows. The glass runs in long horizontal bands along the living module. In the morning, with sun coming in from the east and mountains on the horizon, those windows aren't just windows. They're the best painting you've ever owned, and they change every time you move. That's what makes the camping and off-grid angle of this concept so compelling. The whole point of going somewhere beautiful is to be surrounded by it. This design doesn't just take you there, it frames the landscape for you. Every window a different composition. The cockpit up front demands its own conversation. That raked windshield would create a driver environment that would feel closer to a high-performance aircraft than a traditional motorhome. The visibility arc alone, given how far that glass wraps, would give the driver peripheral vision that most commercial rigs simply cannot offer. In a concept like this, I'd expect the designer's intent to include a fully digital instrument cluster, HUDs-up display projection onto the inner windshield surface, possibly Level 2 or Level 3 autonomous highway capability, and an adaptive air suspension interface that lets the driver raise or lower the chassis for different terrain. The driver's seat would certainly be positioned to feel commanding rather than workmanlike. You're not driving this, you're piloting it. Moving into the main living space, based on the exterior proportions and the clear design philosophy of this concept, I'd expect a layout that prioritizes openness, one continuous space rather than compartmentalized rooms. The kitchen likely integrated into one side of the module, fully appointed, with a surface area that actually lets you cook a real meal rather than reheat something. In a real-world build scenario, you'd want induction cooking rather than gas, cleaner, safer, and compatible with an all-electric powertrain, compact but full-size refrigeration, and somewhere a serious coffee setup, because anyone designing a vehicle this considered is definitely thinking about morning coffee with a mountain view. The seating area opposite would likely convert, common in intelligent motorhome design, giving you both a proper dining configuration and a lounge mode where you can actually stretch out. Floor-to-ceiling storage built into the walls, invisible behind panel lines that match the exterior's horizontal design language. Sleeping quarters rear. Private, probably a full queen or king format sleeping platform, fixed rather than fold-out, because a concept at this level of ambition doesn't ask you to disassemble your living room to access your bed. The ceiling height back here would be the same as the rest of the vehicle, and at night, with the ambient lighting system likely built into the panel lines, this space would feel less like a vehicle bedroom and more like the world's most mobile boutique hotel room. I'd also expect the designer to have imagined an outdoor access point near the rear, a step-down entry that opens directly to the outside. So you park at a remote alpine meadow at dusk, open the rear door, and the boundary between inside and outside dissolves completely. That's not a feature, that's a feeling, and that's what separates a concept worth analyzing from one that's just a big box on wheels. Somewhere in that middle section, the bathroom. In the world of this concept, we're not talking about a cramped, wet bath where you shower sitting down. The interior volume here supports a properly separated bathroom, shower enclosure, vanity, and enough space to actually feel human in the morning. Water management on an off-grid capable vehicle like this would be critical. Large freshwater tank, gray water capture, potentially an onboard filtration and recycling system, because if you're taking this thing to places without hookups, and this concept is absolutely designed for that, you need to be able to stay there for days, not hours. Now let's talk about what would actually power something like this, because a vehicle of this mass, this size, this ambition, the powertrain conversation is genuinely fascinating. If this concept were ever engineered for reality, and I want to be clear, we're in purely hypothetical territory here, the most logical direction is a multi-motor electric drivetrain, not a single motor. Multiple, probably one at each axle, giving you 6-wheel drive capability across all 3 axles. That kind of torque distribution, managed by a sophisticated traction control system, would make this thing capable on terrain that would stop most commercial motorhomes dead. The battery requirement for a vehicle of this mass at highway speed would be substantial. In a near-future production scenario, you'd be looking at somewhere in the range of 500 to 800 kilowatt-hours of storage to deliver serious range. Think 300 to 400 miles between charges under normal conditions. That's not science fiction. Battery technology is already moving in that direction for heavy commercial applications. Now look at that roofline again, that flat, expansive upper surface. In a real engineering scenario, that is prime real estate for integrated solar panels. We're talking a surface area that could realistically accommodate 8 to 12 kilowatts of solar generation. At a remote campsite in full sun, that's the ability to run your entire living module, climate control, appliances, lighting, potentially indefinitely. You drive in, you stop, you unfold from the world, and the vehicle just quietly keeps itself alive. For the off-grid camping use case this concept is clearly imagining, solar plus large battery plus vehicle-to-load capability, where the truck powers external devices or even a secondary vehicle, would make this essentially a mobile power station. You could camp for a week in the wilderness with zero connection to any grid, no campsite, no hookups, no limitations, just wherever you can drive it. The suspension system on a 6-wheel platform like this would certainly be air-based, fully adjustable, allowing the driver to raise the chassis for rough terrain and drop it for highway efficiency. At highway height, that dramatically improves aerodynamics. At camp height, you get easier access and stability. That's an intelligent system, and the technology to build it already exists today.
All right, let's be honest about what stealth ground actually is. It is a concept that swings for the absolute fences of what a land-based living vehicle could be. 10 wheels, a possible rooftop observation deck, supercar windshield geometry on a vehicle the size of a small building, and a design language so coherent, so intentional, that the whole thing reads as a single unified idea rather than a collection of cool features bolted together. What does it genuinely do well? The visual hierarchy. The separation of the black chassis world from the silver living module above it. That horizontal split is one of the smartest design moves in this concept because it solves a real problem. How do you make something this big feel elegant rather than just large? You give it layers. You give the eye somewhere to travel. Stealth Ground does that beautifully. The 10-wheel stance is also something I find genuinely forward-thinking. As the living modules on luxury concepts keep getting more ambitious, more interior volume, more structure, more systems, the chassis underneath needs to evolve too. The idea of a tri-axle platform for a luxury motorhome concept isn't just dramatic, it's logical. And I haven't seen many concept designers go there. What seems impractical? Honestly, the rooftop deck gives me pause. Not because the idea is wrong, the idea is wonderful, but structurally, adding an accessible upper deck to a vehicle that also needs to move at highway speed introduces engineering challenges around weight distribution and aerodynamic stability that a production team would have a serious conversation about. In the world of this concept, it works. In a factory, somebody would earn their salary figuring that one out. If I could change one thing, I'd want to see more glass on the sides of the living module. The window bands visible from this angle are compelling, but I think the designer played it conservative there. Given the roofline height and the interior volume available, panoramic side glass, the kind that gives you a continuous view of the landscape as you travel, would elevate this from impressive to unforgettable. What does Stealth Ground say about where luxury mobility is heading? It says that the people who think about this stuff, The designers, the dreamers, the people who build worlds in AI renderers and concept sketches are done pretending that a motorhome has to apologize for being a motorhome. This is not a compromise vehicle. This is not pretty good for what it is. This is an unapologetically ambitious vision of what it means to live on the road at the highest possible level. And this concept is fictional. It's AI generated. It won't ever roll off a production line exactly as you've seen it today. But that's fine. That's not the point. The point is what it makes you think about, what it makes you want, what it says is possible. That's the whole job of a concept. And on that front, Stealth Ground delivers. Here's what I want to know from you, and I genuinely read every comment on this channel. That rooftop observation deck, game changer or engineering nightmare? Would you actually use it, or is it one of those features that looks incredible in a render and gets ignored the first time it rains? Drop your answer below. I'll be in the comments. If this kind of deep dive concept analysis is why you come to YouTube, the engineering logic, the design philosophy, the honest breakdown of what works and what doesn't, there's a lot more of it on this channel. Hitting subscribe is the simplest way to make sure you catch the next one, because I've got something coming that makes Stealth Ground look like a warm-up.